Good evening and welcome. I'm thrilled that you're joining us tonight, both in person and online, for Golden Gate University's 6th Annual Women's Leadership Forum. I'm Linda Pratt, President of GGU's Alumni Association. I've been fortunate to attend many forums in the past, and in fact, this is my 5th forum. I have to say this is one of my favorite GGU events. No matter where I've been in my career journey, I've found that the panelists of these amazing female leaders have both inspired me and educated me in terms of looking more deeply at my career, but also how my career fits in my life. I hope that all of you, Golden Gate alumni, students, and friends of GGU, also feel very inspired tonight and interested in continuing being involved in Golden Gate's mission. Can you please raise your hand if you are an alum of Golden Gate? Yay! That's fantastic. So I would like to share with you very briefly that the university has been working really hard over the last 2 years in designing initiatives whose goal is to increase the meaningful engagement of alumni. We know that alumni that want to connect with other Golden Gate alum and give back to the university. So tonight I'd like to tell you a little bit about how you can be engaged with Golden Gate University. For example, we are just now launching the new Ambassadors Council. There's an opportunity to have your name placed as a scholarship for new students entering Golden Gate. And there's also an opportunity to be active on the Golden Gate Alumni Association as a director. As I said, there's not enough time to go into a lot of explanation about these volunteer kinds of opportunities. So at this point, I'd like to introduce some of our board members, alumni board members who are in the room tonight. Can you please stand up and raise your hands so that people can see you? That's Marat, Christine, Sutivi, and John. So stand up a little bit because I would like to invite all of you during the networking session after the forum to connect with our board members and to learn more about these engagement opportunities. Thanks so much. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight, and I'm very happy to introduce President David Fike as our moderator and invite him to the podium.
Thanks so much, Linda, and thank you all for coming out this evening to be a part of what I'm expecting to be a very inspiring, informative, and stimulating discussion. I am stepping in for our originally programmed moderator, an extraordinary, I think it needs to be said at this Women's Leadership Forum that our moderator was to be an extraordinary woman leader who unfortunately got sick this week. Barbara Carlin, who runs our Academic Affairs Division here at the university, was going to be a part, and I understand was a part of helping to plan this event, and she regrets that she couldn't be here. But I was planning to be here anyway, so I'm just stepping forward to make some introductions here at the beginning, and then I'll just open it up to the panel to take us away in conversation and discussion. If there's an opportunity for me to insert a few questions along the way that occur to me, or if you have some ideas, wave to me and I'll come and try to get a question from you. But I have a feeling that they've got a lot to share with us, and we'll get started on that right away. We have their biographical information of our panelists here on the screen, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but I would like to say just a couple of brief things about each of them, and I'll start on the far your left, my right. Yvette Hollingsworth Clark is Executive Vice President and Regulatory Innovation Officer within Wells Fargo's Innovation Group. Yvette is also an adjunct professor in the finance department at GGU, having taught the financial reporting and analysis class that is required for all of our master's students, and she's currently working on designing a brand new class at GGU on corporate compliance and ethics that will be launched this spring. Ms. Saundra Davis, who is to Yvette's left, is the founder and executive director of Sage Financial Solutions, which is a San Francisco Bay Area-based organization that develops comprehensive financial capability programs for low and moderate income communities throughout the United States. She is affiliated with GGU as an alum. She earned her BS in management and her MS in financial planning from this university, where she's also currently teaching and has been awarded a distinguished adjunct professor in financial planning, personal financial planning, in the personal financial planning program. To Saundra's left is Samantha Price, who is a partner at Keystone Strategy, which is an innovative strategy and economics consulting firm delivering transformative ideas and novel solutions to global enterprises and law firms on leading-edge challenges in technology, business, and science. Keystone has relationship with some of our faculty, in particular David Franklin, who runs the McCarthy Institute here at GGU. And last, but certainly not least, to the left of Samantha is Sabrina Ross, who is an international privacy and security expert. Sabrina is currently head of policy at Uber and also runs the consultancy Inscape Privacy. She's previously served as a legal director of privacy and consumer protection at Uber and Apple. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our panelists. And we've asked them, I think, to begin talking a little bit about how they look at and define disruption from their perspectives, from the examples that they've served, and give us some description of situations where they've had to lead through the disruptive environment that many of our industries are facing. And I'm going to let you folks take it away from there.
Sure, so I'm happy to speak to that. So as you can imagine, financial services, how many people are in financial services? Right. So we're highly regulated. And as you know, when you're in financial services or any business model, you really need to meet your customers where they want to be served. And with the creation of internet and iPhones, most customers expect to be able to do what they need to do 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, no matter where they are on the planet, right? So you really have to meet your customers where they want to be served. And when I think about disruption, it's, in my mind, it's used as a terminology to introduce new technologies. And so in my mind, it's really not disruptive. It's really keeping pace with how the market is moving forward. Because with, and I'm going to use air quotes, disruption, there's a whole lot of opportunity, right? There's a lot of opportunity to use technology to transform what you're doing currently and to do it more effectively. So from a financial services perspective, you may have seen articles that fintech companies are going to disrupt banks. I don't necessarily believe that in terms of financial institutions won't be around, but the business models will change, right? The importance of data, the ability to customize products for customers based on where they are in their financial life is going to be a really big demand. You won't have the standard platform of here's your checking, savings, student loans. Customers are going to expect everything to be priced individually and the product to be customized towards whatever their life situation is. So from a disruption perspective, I think it's dynamic because it's forcing everyone to get better, right? It's forcing everyone to really have good, effective relationships with customers. The challenge is getting ready. How do you keep pace with a legacy infrastructure and technology when everyone else expects expects to push a button and it happens. How do you do that when you're highly regulated? You have to deal with at least 5 regulators on a daily basis, and sometimes they agree on positions and sometimes they don't, right? How do you deal with the fact that you have host regulators? You may have an international location, and how do you care for U.S.? How do you care for U.K.? How do you care for Japan? Like, it gets really complicated. But when you have technology and data, you can actually do things a lot smarter and faster. So in terms of disruption, I can tell you how I got my job. I was previously Chief Compliance Officer for Wells Fargo, and I wrote a paper about 3 years ago. It was just a white paper on how we should use emerging technology and transform the bank. So, it was like a thank you letter, my yearly wisdom letter to our C-suite, like, yeah, this is what we should do, and I sort of parked it. And when we talked about transforming the bank, they brought my little white paper back to me and said, "Yeah, you remember this white paper? I think this is something we should do." So I'm really having fun working with fintech companies to understand how we can do things in a digitized manner. So my advice to you, if you write a white paper on an idea, be careful who you give it to, because you just might be expected to do it.
All right, I'm up, huh? Okay. So we're at a bit of different ends of the spectrum in the financial world. I am trained as a financial planner, and I serve primarily as a financial coach. And what that means is that I train people mostly in community-based organizations to provide one-on-one financial coaching for people who are low and moderate income. You may or may not know that about 68,000 is considered low income in this area. Yeah, scary, right? Welcome to my world. And so what disruption means to me is very similar to what you described, that, we say things like change is hard, and we make comments like that when the fact is the only thing that is constant is change. Change is happening around us and in us all the time. So the idea of disruption, I don't really like to give words as much power as I think that we're doing as a society right now when we talk about words like that, because I think what it does is puts us back on our heels rather than ready to move forward, and rather than being ready to decide what do we want it to look like. I disrupted the financial planning profession when I joined it. Everyone told me that I was going to have to work first with high net worth clients in order to secure my own financial security. I changed careers at 40 plus just a couple weeks ago. You see what I did there? I changed careers just because I knew that I wasn't going to have enough. Right? And so I decided that I was going to spend as much as it took to get a master's degree at Golden Gate. I'll leave that out. But here's the thing. It was an investment that I made in myself that has paid off over and over again, not only financially, but in my life, in the work that I do. You can't throw a stone in the Bay Area without hitting someone that I don't think we want to hit them, without touching someone that has been affected by the work that I've done. That wouldn't have happened had I not come back and done my master's when I did. And to make the choice to go directly into the nonprofit sector rather than work for high, and I don't begrudge I have students now that I teach in the financial planning program who that's their goal. They want to do financial planning for high net worth folks. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. It just wasn't for me. And so for me to make the choice to do exactly what made my heart beat fast, right? And to be willing to take the risk to do what it took for me to get what I wanted, to be able to deliver the services that I wanted to deliver exactly where my clients are, and then to be able to train an entire cadre. I have trained more than 2,000 people in this country. And to know that I was able to do that because I was willing to walk away from something that was secure and go into something that I had no idea what it was going to look like. And I built it as I was flying it. And I don't recommend that, I'm just saying. But I will say that the area in which I do recommend it is the idea that if you are not living a life that is satisfying to you, do something else. Do something else. And so I truly believe that if we focus on the idea of it being a disruption, we think we have to do something special. You know, we think there has to be some new, I mean, I'm so sick of the word innovation, I can't even tell you. Sometimes just the good old stuff that we know works is what's called for. And even with regard to the financial services industry, everybody's, RoboCops, that's not what I mean. Robo-advisors are going to, I wasn't even trying to be funny that time. I mean, there's times that I'm trying to be funny, but that wasn't one of them. Robo-advisors are going to take us, just take away all the financial planners and going to be out. And you know what we're finding is the robo-advisor companies are now hiring financial planners so that they can talk to people as humans. And that's the part we forget. That one-on-one connection that we make when someone is struggling with their financial situation, to be able to connect with you and see you see them. Right? And know that what you're offering them is empathy and compassion and, yes, financial services and advice, but not looking at them just as a number, but really seeing who they are. And I consider that disruptive, because I think in a time when we're saying that technology is everything, we're forgetting that it's not everything. And how we connect with each other. I love that folks are able to see us out there in Facebook land. Hi, y'all. And I also love that we're here together in this room. And I think that we have to be ready to do both and not to have anyone feel that they're left out on this path to disruptive technology. So for me, disruption is, what is it going to look like when I'm doing what makes my heart beat fast and I'm contributing to society in a way that only I can? I'm done.
A little bit hard to follow. No, I think you make a really good point, and it's, as you were talking about that, I'm thinking about disruption as a circle. It's like the robo-advisors disrupted the traditional model, and now it's just coming full circle and going the other way. When I think about disruption, I don't really have negative connotations with the term, besides the overuse piece. I do think about innovation. Sorry for saying innovation. But I think about technology, services, ideas that really change things in more of a step change way, not an evolution, not an incremental improvement, but really just changing the way we think about things. So, like in the business context, and as a consultant, I look at a lot of different businesses and a lot of different really tough problems. But from a business perspective, in new product development, that's not just making the next version of the iPhone. It's the original point when we created the category of smartphones. And it's not just, making your company or your industry more efficient. It's creating an entirely new business model. So all of the sharing economy companies and like Airbnb, that's just changed what it means to be a hospitality company these days. So those kinds of step change kind of disruptions to the status quo is what I really think about when I think about the term disruption.
So I want to pick up on several themes that have come up here, which were in my bullet point list. The one, that disruption is constant. I think the initial prompt we were asked about was talk about a time that you've led through disruption. And I thought to myself, well, which one? Is it regulatory disruption where GDPR comes in? I talked to several of you about it, and it's the biggest privacy law changing how U.S. tech companies do business, for several decades. Is it technology disruption? Is it internal organizational disruption, a CEO departing, another significant reorg? Or is it sort of personal disruption where what you want out of your life or your career and your life at that point changes? I think every step of my career feels like it has had at least one of those, if not more. I like what several people said about people hitting change, but I have really come to believe, and I think that was true for me at first, that change is opportunity, and that now when I see those things coming, I feel that excitement and my heart beating fast, as opposed to the what is this thing I have to deal with? And that's a good sign. It means you'll have hard problems to solve.
That's what keeps the job interesting.
Yes. I'll stop there so we can go on. But that's some of what I think about in disruption. Is it's constant and it's good.
So let me add one more. Let me add a perspective, because I have to think about those who are in positions, and when my role was created, I heard often, Yvette, are you going to create robots to take our jobs? Is artificial intelligence taking our jobs? And I said, well, I'm going to be honest that we will gain efficiencies with technology. That's the whole purpose of using what's readily available to you. But you should also see the opportunities in this space, right? I wrote an article, I think, for American Banker, and I wrote an article around, is fintechs, is it an evolution or a revolution, right? And of course, for an article, you got to get some sensationalism so people read it. But I said, there's really going to be a whole host of new jobs that are created that don't exist today. So as certain jobs sunset, new jobs will emerge, and there will be no such thing as an expert, right? So for example, when you're a professional, one of my mentors when I was fresh out of grad school said, you have to always reinvent yourself when there's something new, because that's the only time you can become an expert. So I was a regulator at the time, so when the Bank Secrecy Act was brand new, I threw myself at that act, because you know what? We were the experts because we were the first responders. When Dodd-Frank came, I'm like, okay, let's throw ourselves at Dodd-Frank. No one knows it. Right? When fintech came, we're like, you better throw yourself at that because you have a lot of opportunities. And when you think about digitization today, right, there's a need for ethics in using data appropriately. There's a need to make sure that humans do not overly rely on technology to discern what is best for a customer. So there's a concept, algorithmic risk, and we're like, what's that? And they're like, well, who coded the model? How does it weight variables? How are you ensuring that this is done ethically? How do you ensure that the discernment is, coded correctly? And those are new jobs, right? Who does that, right? I mean, you're like, where are we going to find these people?
Yeah, who does that?
Right? Who does that, right? So that's why there's a lot of opportunities. When you think about disruption, think about it in terms of disruptive opportunity. In my mind, my philosophy is that there will always be a human in the middle, because all of this technology is an aid, right? It helps, it helps with creativity. It helps you advance the ball. When you think about disruption big, right, you sort of have like the Kodak moment. You have to sort of put Uber on the page for that. Uber did disrupt the market without a fleet. Airbnb did disrupt the market without a bunch of hotels. And when you think of Gig Walk did disrupt the market for market research, right? Because you're a data point. With Gig Walk, it knows where you are. You can go take pictures for anybody who wants research. So there is a disruptive element, but to Saundra's point, it's really a reflection that people fail to keep pace, right? So use it as disruptive opportunity, because as things sunset, more opportunities will actually sunrise.
Talk about, thank you, that overview, or thinking about how do we approach, or how do we think of disruption? Bring it down to the individual for us. What, from your life's lessons, what you've done, talk about the skills that people need to manage through the disruption. And some of you have touched on this, but I'm inviting you to elaborate. What do people need as they think about trying to navigate through all of this disruptive environment from a skills perspective?
All righty then. So I think the thing that has helped me to survive and thrive when things are changing or disruptions happen, and I'm a woman of a certain age, which means I've been through a couple of thank you. I've been through a couple of disruptions, right? I was disrupted when I got out of the military. I was disruptive when I went to college after being a high school dropout at 15. So I think the thing that I would say is that my ability to not be attached to what I think I know, not being the expert and becoming the expert over and over again. When something is new, really going for it, and there were times that I went for it because I had nothing to lose. There were times that I went for it because I wasn't satisfied with what I had. And so I think that the skills that people need to be able to be responsive to whatever that disruption looks like is, I won't say to not be afraid, because there were plenty of times I was afraid, but I was flexible enough and confident enough that I was okay with not knowing. and not knowing where it was going to end up, and being willing to trust myself enough to know. And I think I had to learn not to be a control freak. How many control freaks in the room? Come on, tell the truth. So I'll say this. I think the thing that has helped me was knowing I'm a control freak and accepting that that was harming me, because it made me afraid to adapt. And I started to realize that my fear of having to adapt was creating limitations. Yeah, so those would be the skills. Flexibility, willing to adapt, and feel the fear, and what does Susan say? Feel the fear and do it anyway? Yeah.
So I guess I have two that are less skills and maybe more strategies. These both feel really relevant to my life right now. After I got done with law school about 10 years ago, I had been reading so much that I was sort of sick of reading, and I stopped reading in long form for like a couple of years, whereas I had always been a voracious reader. And a few years ago, I came back to really reading long form books, long articles, and I would say, honestly, that is hugely being able to think through sort of complex ideas developed slowly over time, which is so different than so much of what I consume day to day, whether it's on Twitter or kind of work memos that are a paragraph long and all I need is like the action item out of it. To put change, which can be scary and upsetting, into the context. So I've used it a lot with the current Trump era, where I need to think about how this fits into American history to grapple with it. Same in the business world. So that's one is, for me, has been reading, and that has some to do with sort of staying curious that you were talking about. And the other has been sort of, I guess, what I see as the flip to that, which is some reflection. I try to keep some kind of an activity log or journal, I don't care what you call it, at least once a year, where I reflect on things like, how am I spending my time every day? What things do I like? Which things do I dislike? Which things are a good use of my time? Which are a poor use of my time? Because it's really in that sort of nitty-gritty, where normally you're too busy to think about those, that you can step back and, again, sort of see the arc of, where is this change driving me? Are there better ways I should be dealing with it? Oh, I'm spending 2 hours a day on stuff that I hate and that doesn't feel like a good use of my time. Is there a different way to manage that? So it's led me to some really good insights, I guess.
So building on some things that all of you have said, I think your point about being flexible and kind of knowing what you don't know is really important. And in my role, I'm a consultant, and a lot of times what we have to do is kind of go out and find the experts, if they exist, and bring together the right disciplines from all different kinds of areas. And kind of having the flexibility to both think of kind of strange connections and different people to draw in, and convening those people, I think, is really important in a world that's changing really quickly. And then your point about kind of staying curious, I think, is a huge piece of it. Some of that's intrinsic, but that's what makes my job so fun. I'm constantly, whether you want to label it disruption or not, I'm constantly having to try to solve really, really difficult, interesting problems. And so just, if that's a good fit and if that's what you like, then it's kind of an indicator that you're likely to thrive in a disruptive environment.
Yeah. So I'll add in terms of skill sets, right? So I will offer that all of us reserve the right to get smarter, right? So you can get smarter. So when I took on this role, legal, compliance, regulatory background, I needed to understand life through a coder's eye, right? I'm like, what is a coder? What do they do? Right? So I went to our innovation group and went to our development team and said, can I sit with some coders just to see what they do? And like, what's this all about? What's this Java, Python thing? What's all this chit-chat about? And I sat with them. I said, I want to see what you do. I really want to understand how you design and develop. And, they taught me how to make a little snowman, so I was really excited about that. But I really spent some time just trying to really get enough content to put it in perspective, right? Then I sat with our platform team who built a new platform. I said, can I just have informational interviews on what experience you went through for, a platform, and how did that all come about? And if I wanted to at least have enough information to have an intelligent conversation with you, what should I do? And they said, well, you should go on, this website. You can sign up for a boot camp. So I'm like, okay, I'll go talk to the people about boot camp and just learn this. So reserve the right to get smarter. When something's new, there's really not a uber bunch of experts, right? So look for opportunities to, if you're in a large organization such as myself, you can probably have resources at your fingertips where you can actually ask to do a couple assignments just to get familiar. But don't hesitate to keep yourself current by taking certain classes, right? Right now I'm looking for a good data analytics class just so I can actually talk to my data architect team, because risk, technology, coders, it's like we are lost in this land of translation. So I'm trying to really figure out how to have intelligent conversations with all these communities in our ecosystem. But part of that is me also investing some time in some one-on-one type subject matter so I can at least understand how to bridge the gap. So just reserve the right to get smarter, right? And don't be intimidated by anything new, because your next opportunity is actually within that newness.
I also want to say that I think one of the things that has been a saving grace for me is that I look at, and I did this when I was in civil service, actually even in the military, I look at who is where I would be 10 years down the road. And if I don't like what I see, I don't mean in the human, but in their responsibility, in the way that their position is respected, in their ability to live and enjoy what they do. If I don't like what I see, I start planning. I might not do anything about it right away, but if I don't like where I will end up, now what that means is I've had 5 careers, so I'm just saying. But for me, that worked. And I think that not being attached to, I never expected to get a retirement and a gold watch. So I never had that. I just kind of always knew that I was going to have to work it out, and which means working it out for myself. I'm a consultant as well. So I know that. I know that if I'm going to get it, I'm going to make it happen. And I think that that has served me well.
Excellent. Talk about the opportunities that you see in your own fields or in general for leaders, for entrepreneurs over the next few years to, I use the word innovate, or to ride this wave of disruption.
I like where you were going with that.
Okay, I'll chime in. I have opinions. So in terms of entrepreneurship opportunities, there is a lot to do, right? If you think about, now that we have increased computing power just as a globe, new doors have opened just around the ability to manage data, right? There are so many opportunities in terms of how do we use, if you think about financial services, and I'm going to create big buckets of risk. You have mass retail, which is just the average customer. Then you have affluent, people who are managed, right? People that have a private banker, or they have a relationship manager to handle their affairs. So when they need something, they just pick up the phone or text, and someone tends to them. But the majority of us sort of have to do that by ourselves, go to the ATM and figure it out. There is a lot of opportunity to really think about, how do I handle the masses? Right? And when people are like, well, how do you guys innovate? I'm like, guys, think about what's current in your life today. Like, what frustrates you today? Right? And if you're a parent, you're a student, you probably can, or employee, or whatever role you're playing, there's a whole lot of things that you wish could be a lot more convenient, right? And that's how you think about, well, what can I do? Right? I sat with our operations team. I said, what annoys you a day? Like, oh gosh, we got to do this reconciliation. I'm like, okay, we're going to come in with a robotics team and see anything that's yes, no. Tell me all your yes, no processes, because I can actually have a machine do that, so you can spend more time on exceptions, right? If you think about, before I got here, I was at a store on Market Street, and I met a shoe designer named Taryn Rose. Am I familiar with her?
Yes.
She was there. She was like a podiatrist, some big time. And so they're like, can you try the shoes on? I'm like, no, I got to go. But she convinced me to try her shoes, and they were like amazing, right? So she has this innovative shoe where this podiatrist customized this shoe, and for ladies, all of our high heels, she has your weight forward, so it doesn't even hurt. You can even walk on skinny heels and don't wobble. I was so excited. I was running around the store in the shoes.
We can be cute again.
We can be cute again, right? But this was someone who's a physician, right, a medical doctor, who actually thought about a different way to serve her customers. So she created shoes. And so she was quite fascinating. So I did call her an innovator. I was like, you're an awesome innovator. I had to go. But just imagine what you can do, what's happening in your life today and how it can be better. So those are the entrepreneurial opportunities. Just, you're an innovator. It's in you. Secondarily, if you just look at community needs, for those of you who, look at social needs, there's a lot of things to do. We have an opportunity to educate children far more earlier than 5 or 6, right? You have a way to supplement, education, whatever your passion is. I have a passion to ensure that everyone has a chance to be financially fit. I have a passion maybe to ensure people are physically fit. Just look at the needs in your community and think about everything you can do to serve that community and make your day-to-day life better. It doesn't have to be these Herculean, brilliant ideas that change the world, like it could be incremental improvements that just gives people a quality of life. I think about when you think about differently able, when we think about customer sets, people try to deal with those who are differently able as separate. But I'm like, no, guys, that's your customer segment. But there's a lot of things that you're probably using for fraud detection that could actually help that community, right? If you just spin that product a different way and say, I'm going to use fraud controls for a guardian to make sure my differently able relative is not disadvantaged, right? So just think about what you want in your world to be different and what makes your heart happy. Those where all your ideals are. They're right there. And then, I think we like to do this in financial services and risk world. If you put Steve Jobs up and you had Bernie Frank, how do you think the Dodd-Frank Act will look?
Right.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot shorter in code.
I guess. So I hear that you're from New York, right?
Yes.
I hear that there is a guy there who has started a business as a professional cuddler.
Interesting.
And he saw a need, yes. So he saw a need. People were feeling detached and not connected. So you know this, right? You know this. You saw this, right? So he has a company, and his job is to cuddle. And people pay him to cuddle. And they go to his home or wherever the cuddling should commence. And that's what he does, that he decided to innovate. and so, but I guess my point is he's filling something that is really needed. And they interviewed some of the people that he was cuddling with. They interviewed him. It was satisfying for him. It was apparently satisfying for the people who were paying him to cuddle. And so I guess, to your point, it's like, what are the things that would make our lives better? And I think there are so many things that we think will make our lives better that turn out not to, like the high heel shoes that I was wearing that I now will have to go find Taryn. But so how do you then do that? And I think one thing, we also seem to think that we have to have the answer. Or if someone is already doing something that's similar, you might throttle back yours because, someone's already doing it. And your people will find you. Your people will find you. There's certainly competition in my field. And I don't worry about that. There are many, many people who want what I have to offer. And so I focus on them. And I don't have to, I have to understand what other folks are doing, but I don't really have to worry about it. I get to do what the kids say, I get to do me, and I do me. And I do my work in a way that honors my integrity in the field and what I want to do, and that really works for me. I say, so if you're an entrepreneur, and I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur, let me just say that. If you do learn, do learn how to run a business. I'd say that was one mistake that I made. I really didn't understand the difference between working in my business and working on my business. So I learned from a coach, an executive coach, many, many years ago, and I do this now most of the time. I take one day a week that I work on my business, no client-facing stuff, 1 week a month, and 1 month a year. Now, her next thing is 1 year every 10 years. I have not got there yet, but that's really the idea. And understanding the distinction between what you do to build your business and that is not client-facing. And I found that to be very helpful. If you are not an entrepreneur and prefer to work in a corporation or in someone else's business, I'd say work like your name is on the door, even if it's not. Work like your name is on the door. And that is what has always served me well. When I'm working for someone else, they don't have to worry about whether or not I'm putting my best effort forward for them. Because if I'm going to work for them, they're going to get my best. Now, it's also important to have really good boundaries. You may have picked up that I have really good boundaries. I take very good care of Saundra. I take very good care of me, and I really do put me first. It's not always perfect, but I do exactly what you described, Sabrina, about the book. Mine is right here. I carry it wherever I go. And I track my life. I track the things that make me happy. I track the things that make me unhappy. Chocolate tends to be in the running for making me happy most of the time, and so I do that. A lot of chocolate.
Samantha, Sabrina, and opportunities?
Sure. Well, I think I just want to build on the point you made about whether you kind of choose to be an entrepreneur or you choose to work within an existing organization. I think knowing yourself and knowing what makes you happy and what gets you up in the morning is really important, and to not try to kind of force one path or the other, but also to recognize when you're off the path and it's not kind of motivating you in that way. I also agree with work like your name is on the door. It makes a lot of sense. But I think, the opportunity is really, there's so many different things there's so many different jobs, there's so many different problems to solve, there's so many different companies to build, there's so many different companies that already exist to grow, and finding something that's a really good fit for both your capabilities, but really more your interests, because I think the capabilities come with it when you're super passionate about something. I think that's where the real opportunity is. I see a lot of people, I graduated from an MBA program 7 or 8 years ago, and I have many classmates who've changed jobs several times. And, in that process where they're sort of finding the right fit, it feels like there's so much wasted effort because you're just not as efficient when you don't care about what you're doing or when it's not a good fit. So I think the opportunity is in knowing yourself, figuring out how to apply that in a way that makes you really excited to go to work every day, and kind of finding that match.
Yeah, on that note, on sort of knowing yourself, and this ties into the question, I think so. I just went through somewhat of a career transition where I had been doing privacy law for a while. I love it. I feel so lucky that I got into that career, but I was like a tiny bit bored, and that boredom was sort of like increasing. And but by the way, at the same time as salaries were going up, so people kept telling me, just take another privacy job. Like they're great. And I was like, yeah, but I'm just not that excited about it. And I had noticed that one thing I really liked was a lot of the interdisciplinary work. So you sort of referred to this about sitting down with coders and making sure you could translate between coders and ethicists and lawyers. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was like, a lot of my problems are solved not just via legal solutions, but by having a better designer at the front end or telling our privacy story better. It's not actually a legal problem. And so I got really excited about sort of a different side of something else I was working on, and moved in that direction. And I guess I would say I feel like there's a lot of opportunity at the like intersectional, if you have my personality type of, there's all these fields are coming together, and there's really rich, when you see two things and how they come together is interesting to you, there's a lot of opportunity there, I think.
And I think that there's something to be said for the personality type test. I don't know have you ever taken a DISC profile? Have anybody taken the DISC? Okay. Yeah, so this DISC profile for me, it helped me make sense of why there were some things that no matter how hard I tried, I just was not good at. And that really relieved a lot of pressure for me to try to step up into something that I just, no. Just know. And I think that helped me too. Once I did that and I understood, we were talking earlier about the Myers-Briggs, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes knowing a little bit more about yourself, and if you're having difficulty being objective, getting some information either from an assessment or from people who care about you. And when I say care about you, I mean your truth tellers, not the ones that are just going to say, oh, no, it's perfect just the way it is. I mean the ones who will really tell you. My truth teller is here in the audience, and so one of the things that I think is really important is that we're not afraid to look at ourselves and not shy away from the areas that we might have to stretch.
Yeah. So I just want to add one more perspective on the notion of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not necessarily you being on your own with your shingle, dragging something down the street like by me. If you're in a corporation, there's a concept of intrapreneurs, right? So you can actually be an entrepreneur within your company, right? I happen to work for a very large company and have some concepts. So our team we're intrapreneurs, right? And you walk in and we all have our little areas like it's our storefront. But you have opportunities to contribute to strategic directions internally. If you're a small or large firm, don't lose sight of the fact that if you're working on day-to-day matters, you clearly have full authority to know what could be better, right? And so take those opportunities, right? And it's okay to think small. Maybe there's a process that you work with that needs to be enhanced by using technology, be enhanced by changing a business model. Those are entrepreneurial stories, right? And you just pitch them like you want to pitch something, internally, and don't forget you're an entrepreneur in that aspect too, right? So there's always opportunities to innovate. And
I'm not going to live that one down.
We're believe it or not, we're approaching the end of our hour, but I've got one more question that I'm very eager to hear your perspectives on. We've talked about the individual, we've talked about how to approach disruption all around us. I want you to opine for us on organizations and the workplace. And in particular, what I'm interested in is a hallmark of disruption is that, and rapid change, is that there are winners and losers and people get shoved aside or passed by or shut out. And in this period of disruption, what are the human realities and the human dimensions that we need to keep in mind as organizers of workplaces in order to keep our workplaces accessible and equitable through this change?
I'm not starting that one.
Okay, since you guys aren't going there. So in terms of keeping the workplace accessible, and so you stay current, right? That's really the concept. You should probably think about the fact that business models will always change, right? And I know there's some finance people in the room. There's no CFO who's going to say, please be inefficient, right? That's, if you're working for a revenue-generating company, gaining efficiencies is critical. That's always going to be part of the model, and change will happen, right? Things are going to, like I mentioned earlier, certain processes and business models will be eliminated. And when you face that scenario, I think you shouldn't take it personally, like, oh, I wasn't fit for purpose and I don't add value, right? You need to keep pace with what the value proposition is and how it's changing, right? And those are that fine print stuff. Right, I work in financial services, and we always know, financial statements are one thing, but the disclosures are better, right? So we go straight to the footnote to get a sense of where things are pulsing. There's always industry indicators too, but things are going to happen, right? You're going to be laid off. You're going to go through a reorg. Maybe a robot does show up one day, and someone has a technology solution to deal with your job, but as you think about how to manage through change, don't get overwhelmed or underwhelmed about it. It's going to happen. If you just keep living long enough, you're going to be disrupted in some kind of way. And I think just how you handle that is really understand what's needed for the next gen. And it's okay to take pauses to get ready. right? And really understand the profile of what's changed. When I think about, we talked about the MBA and the risk manager, the lawyers, right? Very paper-based jobs. You're going to need data scientists, right? So I'm actually doing like little campaigns. People are like, what is a data scientist? Like, what is that? Where you find these people? What is this? Are those the spreadsheet people? We're like, no, there's no spreadsheets anymore, right? We're done. Like, we don't need an Excel guru. We actually got a button. You put run and it happens, right? But you really have to really think about, how do I stay current and prepare? And if you are in a situation where something has taken over, understand the strategic direction and keep up, right? You got to keep up. That's what I can offer. I don't know if that was a good answer, but you guys punted.
It was good. We did punt. We did, and way to go on handling the punt. So this is a tough one. I mean, so much of my work is about people who are left out. People who are disenfranchised, people who are, I love the word you used, Doc, undercapitalized, that's what I do, and so many of the people that I serve are truly not in this space where they can feel that it's accessible or welcoming for them. And so I think that's where, I'm not in a big corporation, so I can't really speak to that. But what I can say that as individuals, we can make sure we're making room for people who don't look like us, and whatever that means. I was speaking somewhere, sometime, and when I speak, I generally don't like to use a microphone. I think it's kind of pretentious, and so I didn't want to come across as pretentious. So they said, do you want a microphone? And I said, no. And a woman in the audience put her hand up and she says, I'm hard of hearing, and it would be helpful if you would use the microphone. And it never occurred to me that little thing that I was doing was impacting someone in that way. She should not have had to disclose anything. I should have had the presence of mind to recognize that everything I do when I'm standing in front of the room has an impact. We never have a neutral interaction with each other. We are either moving people forward on their journey and possibly even getting in the way. And so each one of us can be mindful of how we're impacting one another. And so for me, as an individual business owner, I'm always challenged by making sure that everything that I do is equitable and accessible to not only the people that I want to serve, but people who just randomly show up in my life. That's the breathing bell. Go ahead. And so I think that that's something that we can do, to really make sure that we are being thoughtful and mindful about our individual impact and our collective impact, so that as we're in this disruptive time, we don't leave each other behind.
I have so many thoughts on this. I'm going to try to limit myself. I'm in a lot of meetings right now where I'm the only woman in the room. I'm used to that. It's not a huge deal. But I definitely notice, to your point, when the people with more authority, or if I'm the only woman in the room, the men look at me and say, like, we want to hear what you have to say now, and take active steps to make sure that I feel empowered. I try to do that in separate contexts. So that's one thing, sort of paying attention. I think as a new mom, technology should be moving forward, sort of gender equity, parental equity faster than it is. If you are at a big company, there should be technologies that let you work remotely so you can have a flexible schedule, sort of things along those lines. And then I think to your actual accessibility point, I'm fighting right now to hire someone who is a product manager just on product accessibility, so that there's someone in the room whose job is to think about how accessible is our product, can a deaf person use it? Again, that's somewhat resource constrained to how big of a company it is, but I would love to have, if not individuals, companies doing that, them consulting with nonprofits or companies that serve in that capacity and kind of outsource it.
So I love the point you made about kind of men calling on women. I'm also often the only woman in the room. I'm the only female partner at my firm right now. and ever, actually. But one thing that, in addition to having really great colleagues who have kind of helped boost me up in that way to give me a voice, I find that, I'm I'm an extremely introverted person, and sometimes being in the leadership role as a woman at my firm, it's not my first instinct to kind of be out there and be a presence and be kind of the female face of Keystone. It's not really something that I want to do, or I wish I lived in a world where I didn't have to do that. But I think, part of, I do feel it's my responsibility. I need to put myself out there more, and to kind of help, women is one piece of it. It's not just women. It's making sure that kind of we're creating opportunities for all people in the individual, at a micro level in our firms, because that's kind of how it grows.
So I think also to that point, you all might not have noticed, but I'm a tad introverted. No, seriously, really, I know, don't look at me like that, really. And one of the things that I'm learning is that we're making more room for people to really appreciate. I think when we get away from the idea of tolerating diversity to appreciating diversity, even in personality, because there was a new article about why introverts make the best entrepreneurs. And so we're starting to be more thoughtful in this age of disruption, where we're not just saying you've got to be type A, you've got to be this, if you want to be successful. There's all kinds of ways to be successful. And if you think about, and I'd invite each one of you to think about, what must you do? What must you do to feel satisfied that you've done the thing that's most important to you? And do that thing. And it might be some hurdles, and it might be going back to school, it might be partnering with other people, it could be a lot of different things. But really make sure that you know what you must do, and then do that thing.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we have more food and drink and a lot of camaraderie and sharing of discussion of these ideas and many others. I did want to make a couple of closing remarks, but before I do that, please join me in thanking our panelists for a very stimulating discussion. I found this to be just almost like a intensive in leadership. I mean, listening to you all talk, and somebody who's done a lot of work in leadership, the wisdom that you just shared with us was very special, and I'm very grateful that you've brought these ideas to this forum to be shared with this community. I find it so interesting that we're talking about disruption in 2018 here in San Francisco at an institution that was founded actually in 1901, but our roots go back to the gold rush era. A lot of people don't know that, but we began Golden Gate University as a set of courses and practical skill training at the YMCA's. And that movement, our institution's roots and the entire movement that spawned that sort of mind-body spirit of the Y was all about a movement, a social movement that was about helping people deal with post-industrial, people, families, communities, about post-industrial disruption. And so here we are 150 years later, talking about disruption and talking about change, and as was our panelists reminded us, change is constant, and I think that connection illustrates that point. So we're very proud to have been able to host this event this evening, and to be able to hear your wisdom. As we close out and move into the networking portion of the evening, I did want to acknowledge again Linda Pratt and her leadership on the Alumni Association Board, the other members of the Alumni Association Board that are here. And I also wanted to point out that we have a number of individuals that work here at GGU and run programs at GGU. We have our Dean of the Agino School of Business, Gordon Schwartz, is in the back, I believe. There's Gordon. We have Marianne Cook, who runs our HR department, who is also here. I know that I think Mark Singer, who is our brand new Dean of the undergraduate program, was here. He might have had to step out. And I know the Dean of our law school, Anthony Nidwicki, was also here. And I wanted to acknowledge Mary Ellen McGillen, our Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations, and her colleague Priscilla, who were very instrumental in helping put this program together. And I want to thank them for the hard work that went forward there. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the networking.